Continue in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Chav Daled. Before we begin Pasuk Tes, we still have to finish up a little bit upon David's refusal to kill Shul, and instead coming behind him and cutting off his cloak. And the Gemara says, Gemara in Brachas Samach Beis Amud Beis says that really, although Shul warranted that he should be killed because he was trying to kill David, but it was his tznius that saved him. So the Ben Yehoyada has a very interesting pshat that helps us develop what was going on in a clearer way, according to his line of reasoning, and why it was the tznius, although he gave already one reason, more in terms of a mystical reason. He brings now a practical reason why this is so. And he says like this: when David's, this Ben Yehoyada is on the Gemara, when David's cohorts set him to kill Shul, so you notice he didn't respond to them right away. So only afterwards. So why only after he cut the garment does he give this answer? So we already gave one answer to this, but he gives another more practical reason. So he says like this: in the beginning he never planned on killing him, even though Shul was running after him. But he says it's all the people who are speaking Lashon Hara. They're the ones that are fooling him. They're leading him astray by saying that David wants to kill you. So therefore, let me figure a way to be able to save myself from you without having to kill you, as we mentioned before. But more than this, what I'm going to do is to show you that all the Balei Lashon Hara have been lying to you. You know, again, the main thing is you want shalom. That's the main thing. Not always the easiest way of shalom is the best way of shalom. Yes, the easiest way would kill Shul, but that wouldn't necessarily be so easy, because that would create a lot of enemies for David, and that could cause a lot more war. Don't you think all his Shul's generals, Doeg, and all these people, you think they're going to sit by and let Shul be killed like that? There could be a great civil war. This is not what he wanted. He just wants Shul to stop running after him and not to want to kill him. So he figured by cutting off a corner of his garment, so secretly, and after Shul comes out of the cave, then he'll tell him how you were in my hands and I didn't kill you. So that will disprove the Balei Lashon Hara, that they have spoken lies. And so it was when indeed this is exactly what happens. It was clear, and Shul confessed to David that he was wrong. So since David had this possibility of doing this means instead, so why am I allowed to kill him? As we said last Thursday, that if somebody comes to kill you and you can save yourself by just hurting one of his limbs without having to kill him totally, you're forbidden to kill him. So therefore, if he could save himself by cutting off the corner of the garment, so that's what he has to do. That's all. But so when he's going, and his cohort told him to kill him, so he thought in his heart that he doesn't want to kill him, but he doesn't tell it to these people at all for many reasons, because they might not agree and they get upset, etc., etc. They might kill him. Who knows? But he didn't want to tell them I'm not allowed to kill them, because he knew he wasn't dealing with Talmidei Chachamim over here. He wasn't dealing with people on his level. So he's going to walk over to Shul, and they're going to think he's going to kill him. They're going to think he's going to kill him, plain and simple. And it's probably dark in the cave. They don't know exactly what's going on over here. But he wanted to wait and see if his tactic would work or not, because he wasn't sure the tactic would work. Why wasn't he sure? Even though he had a great plan, but maybe the plan won't work, being able to secretly cut off his garment. And if he doesn't, then indeed he would have to kill Shul. Really. For example, what if he is stealthily going behind Shul, and for whatever reason, Shul turns his back and turns around and sees David? What's David going to do then? Then David is obliged to kill Shul, because there's no way Shul's not going to kill him. So, therefore, he's not sure. And certainly Shaul, if he would see David creeping up behind him, he would certainly think that David is trying to kill him, and therefore he would try to kill David, and therefore David would have to kill him. So therefore David wasn't sure what was going to happen, and therefore in the beginning to the cohorts he was quiet. He didn't say anything. He wants to see if the plan can work or not. David himself doesn't know what's going to happen. Optimally, he'd like to cut the corner off of Shaul's garment, and that would be the greatest way and the best solution. But he doesn't know if Hashem will bless him in such a way that he can make that best solution, and he may have to end up killing Shaul. So if he has to end up killing Shaul, then the cohorts are happy anyway that he killed Shaul. And if he doesn't kill Shaul, very quickly after he cuts the garment, he'll show everybody what his main plan was, and the cohorts would agree to that as well. So therefore, he doesn't know what's going on. So now that David is able to go over to Shaul, and Shaul isn't able to suspect what happened at all, and now his plan came into fruition, and now it's clarified to Shaul that David is not his enemy. So now, after he cut it, and now he comes back to them, he says, Chalila, God forbid that I should have killed him. That I should have killed him. And even though at that point, then it says, Vayishasa David, and David had to stop them. He had to splinter them. He had to stop them because they weren't very happy with that. But it wouldn't take long, because very soon Shaul will come out of the cave. It's not like he has to hold him at bay for an hour or two. It'll take another couple minutes at most. And then he'll be able to show everybody, what was going on. He'll have to keep him quiet for a minute or two. So he's saying, why do I have to kill him? I have a better way that I don't have to kill him. And now, we'll see what happens. And indeed, and he says, look, he couldn't tell that I did it, and we'll see. I'll be able to prove to him that I don't hate him, etc., etc. So good. So the question is, now the Ben Yehoyada asks, but how was it, Taka, that Shaul could not even feel that David was cutting his garment? If I would come behind you and start cutting your suit, you wouldn't feel it? So to this, that's what the Gemara answers. It was the tznius of Shaul that saved his life. It was the tznius of Shaul that saved his life. Because by the fact that he as the Gemara says, he had the coat be like a tent. Since he had the coat be like a tent, so a lot of the coat settled on the floor, and then it's not like hanging down from him. Since it's not hanging down from him, he wouldn't be able to feel that part of the garment that's being cut. That's what David is saying. Since you were in such a tznius way, therefore I was able to cut it in a way that you wouldn't tell, and therefore you couldn't tell that I did it, and that's what saved his life. Because the Ben Yehoyada feels at least that there had been, otherwise it wouldn't have been likely that David could have cut off the garment without it being recognized. Right? So therefore he didn't have to kill him, and therefore that saved his life. Okay, is there anything else over there? Yeah. So that's the pshat. Now you could dingzach on that a little bit. You could argue on that a little bit, because what would have been natznius? What would have been the natznius way to do it?
Take it off.
Well,
Take it off.
Oh, so let's think about it. So if you take it off to the side, then would David's of cutting the garment have proved anything?
Yeah, he was still there.
Close enough to get him.
Yeah, he was still
There's nothing
there.
about cutting it while it's on you
Yeah.
that shows I could have stabbed you. It's
Could be if
getting
it's on the side,
Yeah.
it may have lost a little of it.
Of the impact.
And certainly he could have cut it in such a way that Shaul wouldn't have realized either, and maybe it would have been easier. So I don't know how the Ben Yehoyada deals with that.
Well, Shaul didn't realize it was cut until
He
they
didn't,
pointed
but
it
if
out
it would
to
have
him.
been not tznius, he would have taken the whole garment off. Taken the whole garment off. Now, unless he took all the garment off, he would have put it in front of him as opposed to behind him.
Behind him.
I would say put it in front.
But even that idea that it's
Put it in
more-
front, then maybe David couldn't have done it at all.
it's more
If it wasn't
impactful once
tzniustic,
it's
he would have put the garment maybe in front of him, and then David couldn't have secretly cut if it's in front of Shaul. Can't imagine Shaul would have put it behind him.
Why not?
Well, why would he put it behind him? Just to reach for it, he'd just take it off and do what he has to do. So then it could have been, he would have been able to, probably been in his sight range. But now that he acted tzniustic, it's possible that it didn't reach at all for him to be able to see that. So that's the technical ways. We have the hashkafidic understanding of the tznius, and you have the practical way of how the tznius saved his life.
I thought this cave was like long and dark. Because
Yeah. Yes.
The back. How do they know it's the king and it's coming? I mean, it's dark.
Well, but Shul's coming in from the light. He's coming in from the light. When you're in the dark, and you could see the person coming in from the light. The guy from the light cannot see what's in the dark.
The front of the cave probably has a little bit of light also.
And he probably didn't go so deep into the cave.
If he sneezes, why would he go deeper where no one can see him where it's dark?
He went in Sneez's way, but he didn't have to go all the way to the back of the cave for it. So he need to go all the way to the backest part of the cave and go partially in. So that was enough for Shul's needs, and whatever. I mean, obviously they knew it was Shul. I mean, it could be they heard Shul talking to the guards outside the cave. You know, I'll be back in a minute. You know, obviously, it's not that impossible to be able to figure a way for them to know it was Shul. Now, one more important continuation of that Gemara. Where is this? Oh. So, the Gemara continues. And the Gemara says, on that thing that David cuts the corner, the Gemara says, I said this already, Kol Mavazas Habagodim, anyone who denigrates clothes, with Sofen and Ahanamam. At the end, he doesn't get benefit from it. And the proof is from this Gemara, from this story. It says when David got old, his clothing couldn't warm him up. And that's because he denigrated the beged of Shaul HaMelech. So the question is, well, what do you want from David? What was David supposed to do? Better for him to kill Shaul? I mean, what were the options? Killing Shaul is not it's much better to rip a garment than to kill somebody. So some of the versions say it doesn't matter. He had to end up denigrating the garment, and at the end of the day you have to suffer that, which I don't really like that shot. However, there's other medrashim that suggest the following. Says that when it says Vayachar came Vayach Leiv David also, it said that David, it's like his conscience was hitting him, right after he did this. It was bothering him. So Rabbi Yehuda says that what was bothering him when he cut the garment. By cutting the garment, he nullified the mitzvah of tzitzis. If he's cutting off a corner, it says he cut off a corner. It means he cut off a corner of the tzitzis. He cut off the corner of the tzitzis. Now, one second. So the Moshe Nevi'im says the following. He says he doesn't understand what this Chazal is saying, and he says, one second. And like what was the fault of David HaMelech by cutting off the corner of the tzitzis? Like the Gemara uses the expression, what was between this corner and another corner, right? So, and then he's saying because he cut off the corner of the tzitzis. So the Muslim Nevi'im says, he says a person isn't. He says she'ein adam olu lasos aver gedola b'kfitza achas. Usually a person doesn't jump to doing big averas. And with chilu nichshol b'avoda ketana. Usually you start by doing a small avera, and that causes you to do other averas. As we know, more in Sukkah, etc., tells us you start with small averas, you come with big averas. Therefore, it says anoshim gedolim kishe'ez avera ketana yasud jump to do a small avera. They worry about it. Not only about that, but what's going to eventually happen because of that. And therefore, David was concerned because he did a small avera, because with this, he cut off the tzitzis from him, and therefore he wasn't able to do the mitzvah of tzitzis. And this could be the complaint against David. The complaint is that if you have to cut something, why didn't you cut like the middle of the coat where you wouldn't nullify the mitzvah of tzitzis? And by nullifying the mitzvah of tzitzis already, he's causing Shaul to sin. And that, is possibly the only explanation that of what he did wrong in this aspect. I'm obviously can appreciate he was under stress, he didn't have a lot of time to make a decision, and maybe it was a lot easier to cut the corner than to cut a different part.
It's very difficult to cut a piece out somewhere else, corner.
But it would have not have nullified the mitzvah tzitzis, between Shaul and David. Now you could say, possibly based on Pshat of the Chiddushei HaRim's Pshat and mitzvah tzitzis, that maybe he bedavka cut the corner where the tzitzis was, to show Shaul a message of what is the message of tzitzis. Basically, I don't have time to go through the whole piece of the of that piece, but basically says the mitzvah tzitzis, one who keeps the mitzvah tzitzis is able to purify one's vision, the way one looks at something. And basically what that piece says, when a person looks at his garment, when you look at a four-cornered garment and you see it comes to edges, comes to an end, it reminds a person that just like the garment is a covering of the body, the person remembers that his body is a garment for his soul. And just like the garment comes to an end, comes to a corner, to a stopping place, so too does the body come to a stopping place. So therefore, a person will realize that a person's body comes to an end. Like the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, you have to know that what's going to happen to you at the end of your life, where you come from, where you're going to. At the end of the day, your body's going to go into the ground. And if one fulfills the mitzvah tzitzis, one is able to play down one's focus on the physical world, and rather play up one's focus on the spiritual world. And when one is able to do that, then one is able to look at the world in a different way. And when you look at the world from a spiritual viewpoint, as opposed to a physical viewpoint, then it's easier to do mitzvahs. You will see them, and you remember that you're a neshama. If you know that you're a neshama, then vasisim, then you're able to do all the mitzvahs. If you know that you're a neshama, you're not a body, and you really understand that message, then you're more likely to do mitzvahs than not doing mitzvahs. And therefore, when you're putting the tzitzis right on your body, and they have corners and they have an ending, and you know that is really just like the garment is a garment to your body is a garment to your soul. Therefore, if it's just a garment to your soul, you don't get too serious about it. Don't take it too seriously. And you don't take a lot of things in life too seriously. And therefore, you also says, the Chiddushei HaRim says, that once you develop this understanding that you're a neshama, you're not a body, then your whole way of looking at life changes. And then he says, you don't have a physical way of looking at things, you have a spiritual way of looking at things. When you have a spiritual way of looking at things, the whole world looks different. And basically how it looks different is that you don't internalize the world just by what your fleishik eyes see, but you have to know that there's much more than what's in the picture of what you see. And with that, you're able to, the whole idea of, how, he says the avoda of the einayim is a big avoda. The service of your eyes is a big avoda. And the mitzvah tzitzis helps you with that avoda. And therefore, what it basically is saying is the mitzvah tzitzis assists you in not looking at the world superficially, but rather looking at the world in a much deeper way. And this could very well have been this could very well be the message David was saying to Shaul. He said, when you stop looking at the world in a superficial way, when you Balei Lashon Hara love to look at the world in a superficial way. And you're listening to these guys who are speaking Lashon Hara, who are looking at the world in a superficial way, and therefore, when you start looking at things a little bit deeper, you're not looking at things the way a Ben Torah is supposed to look at things. And that's when he's cutting off the knaf, the tzitzis. He's teaching him this. And that's what the whole idea of the mitzvah of tzitzis, right, is in Parsha Shlach. Why is it in Parsha Shlach? Right, the end of Parsha Shlach. So again, the pshat is because what was wrong with what the spies did? They spoke Lashon Hara. Why did they speak Lashon Hara? Because they looked at Eretz Yisrael in a superficial way. They looked at it from the focus of a body and not from the focus of the neshama. If you look at Eretz Yisrael as a body, you're not going to see very good things about Eretz Yisrael. From a body perspective, Eretz Yisrael doesn't appear to offer very much. If you look at it from a neshama perspective, now you're talking about a whole different thing. Look, what do I want to live in Eretz Yisrael for? You know, you never know if it's going to rain, and you could have droughts, and you have to conserve the water, and all this. From a body perspective, who in the world in their right mind wants to live in Eretz Yisrael? But if you say, Adarabba, the same person, if you look a little deeper, said, you see how badly you need water? It means you have to turn to Hashem every minute. It's amazing. You're in a place where you have to always think about Hashem to take care of you. As opposed to other places, you don't have to live in Toronto, no matter how bad it is, you never have to turn to Hashem and daven for rain. You figure that's good. No, that's not good. It's better that you have to turn to Hashem, and it's a land that you must talk to Hashem at all times, because He doesn't let go of you. You know every second He's taking care of you. Now, from a North American point of view, North American eyes say that's not a place for me. A place for me is where I don't have to ask Hashem for anything, and I can take care of myself. That's a physical way of looking at this world. That's the wrong way of looking at this world. Hashem never wanted us to live in this world this way. The greatest curse is not needing Hashem. Knowing that you need Hashem every second keeps you connected to Hashem. And therefore, Adarabba, Eretz Yisrael, because you don't know it's going to rain, and because there's tremendous hardships if Hashem doesn't help you, therefore you have to always turn to Hashem, then that's the best place in the world to live. So it depends what kind of eyes you have. So the Meraglim, the spies, they look at Eretz Yisrael with their fleishik eyes. And with their eyes, they say, what do you want Eretz Yisrael for? Besides all the ulterior motives that were not correct. But even on the simple level of description, because that's where they were looking at things. Now this was after, now remember, and the Gemara says, why were they punished? Because they didn't learn from Miriam. Right? Miriam spoke Lashon Hara against Moshe. Totally different caliber of Lashon Hara than what they did. It was based on the same thing. Why did Miriam speak Lashon Hara? Because she didn't know what? One little piece of information that nobody knew is that Moshe Rabbeinu's level of prophecy was different than everybody else's level of prophecy. She said, I'm a prophet, Aaron's a prophet, Moshe's a prophet. The two of us are still with our spouses, why can't Moshe? Very logical question. And the criticism is coming from a good place. But hold on there, did you check out all the facts before you criticized him? Did you maybe say, maybe he's different than us? Did you maybe in a polite way say, Hashem, there's something I don't understand, I'm not complaining, I'm not criticizing, but it appears that Moshe feels he doesn't feel his wife. Is there some halacha, navi, that prevents him? Hashem would say yes, then fine. But for her to start with the criticism without checking out the facts, that means you're looking at things on her level, superficially. So that's why she got punished with saras. Everybody's supposed to learn from that, especially the spies. You're going to go into Eretz Yisrael, learn the lesson. You don't look at things superficially. So then what happens? What happens? So then Hashem says, you know what, guys? Now I'm going to teach you about the mitzvah of tzitzis. Now you understand how important the mitzvah of tzitzis is. Tzitzis is going to teach you. It's going to be a divine assistance for you to look at the world differently. If you look at the world differently, you won't be a Baal Lashon Hara. That's the connection between tzitzis. That's why the parsha of tzitzis comes mamish right, almost right after this whole story. Why? Because if you would have tzitzis, you wouldn't talk Lashon Hara. I was hoping you'd be in Eretz Yisrael. Being in Eretz Yisrael alone could stop you from speaking Lashon Hara. But you need this mitzvah. Now you know clearly why. Yeah, it's for sure for this reason. So good. So now you understand. This is what I'm suggesting, is why David cut the knaf that tzitzis off. He's saying, Shul, you're not getting the mitzvah of tzitzis. You're living without the mitzvah of tzitzis. Your tzitzis should, if you were wearing tzitzis, you wouldn't be makabel this Lashon Hara. Right? Don't you get it? So it's like you're not wearing the tzitzis. Putting on the tzitzis and not knowing why you're putting it on, it's like you're not doing the mitzvah. So Shavit was showing him, and by his whole explanation, as you'll see in a minute, he's explaining to him, you don't know what's going on. You're not looking at it properly. And therefore he cuts the knaf at tzitzis to show that you totally don't understand what it's all about. And you're a makabel Lashon Hara. I think that's a reasonable interpretation. It's not too much drush on that. Afal pikein, and it's still in all, David still gets punished. Sometimes, as I've said in other cases, the Gemara says person shouldn't run after Malchus. Sefas says you shouldn't run after Malchus. Gemara says you shouldn't run after Malchus. Why? Malchus mekaveris is bala. Malchus buries its owners. If you're a king, it's not a good thing. Why? It says Yosef HaTzadik, he died 10 years prematurely. Why? Because he died the youngest of all the brothers. Why? Because he was the king. And why did he die 10 years earlier? Right? Because the brother said 5 times to him, "Our father, your servant." And then the interpreter repeated it 5 times. So 10 times he heard the words, "Our father, your servant," which was not their cheres. He shouldn't have, he said, "What do you mean? He's my father too. You can't call him a servant in front of me." So because of those 10 times, he lost 10 years from his life. So I asked, I think it's my question, I don't remember. Sometimes I forget what I'm thinking, what I read, and I forgot what I read it. So the question is, so I don't understand. But he had a whole cheshbon. He had a masquerade like Safas Panaf. The brothers couldn't know who he was. He couldn't blow his cover. If he would have said, "Don't talk to him about that," they would have blown his cover. The answer is, I feel, that someone's being a king will sometimes force you to do things that you shouldn't be doing. Sometimes you're in such a position, there's so many factors you have to deal with. Something's got to give. You're a regular guy, you could live regular life. You could say things as they are. King is not always in position to do what he wants to because there's so many factors impinging on him. So he's got to do things, even with the best of intentions, he has to do things that eventually are not good. And he had no other way but to hear and not say anything. And he got punished for it. So maybe the same thing for David. Sometimes the fact that he did it, what negatively impacts upon. In other words, the way maybe Yosef Taka had to be quiet. He had to be quiet. But the very fact you hear 10 times your father's servant is going to give a little bit of a negative vibe of how you look at your father. And for that alone, there's got to be a tikkun for that. So David HaMelech, there was no other way to do it. But cutting a small garment is still cutting a small garment. And in some certain way, as much as David was trying his best, he did something that wasn't proper. You don't damage a garment. And by damaging a garment, he could lose the esteem for what a garment's all about. And therefore he'll have to learn the lesson. It's not so much always a punishment, it's learning the lesson. And learning the lesson is, garments are very special things. He could have thought, after that, since he cut it, maybe garments aren't that special. I don't think with so much respect. So he says, no, that's very special. Be that as it may, I think...
Learning the lesson in David's case was at the end of his life when he couldn't use that lesson for any...
The main thing is how you leave this world. But sometimes the best lessons are learned at the end of life.
What's the point of the lesson at the end of his life when he cannot...
Go ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Go ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Okay.
He had enough things to deal with in his life. That was, we'll have to get to that story, why at that particular point in time he had learned that lesson. We'll see. But obviously it was something that had to be repaired. So sometimes, even when you're doing things that are proper, but sometimes you have to do negative things to make proper conclusions. Sometimes, the means have to sometimes be negative. He had no other solution. So he had to use a means that wasn't 100% proper. Okay, wasn't 100% proper. But he's still, when you're doing something that's not proper, at the end of the day, sometimes you have to, whatever, sometimes you have to, even if you have to, let's say, sometimes it's a time where you're obligated to speak Lashon Hara about someone. Sometimes you're obligated to warn people of impending trouble. You have to say things. That doesn't mean you feel good after you say it. After you say it, you feel, why did I have to say all this stuff? Even though you were doing it for reasons and you're allowed to, and it's fine. But still, you feel dirty. You feel like you have to go to the mikveh afterwards.
I'm sure David didn't feel good about cutting short.
So I'm saying, so whatever. But Hashem says, still in all, you did damage a garment. Still in all, as much as you don't realize it, a maisa avera, even though it's not an avera, right? But it was the lesser of two evils. Still, it's going to do something to your subconscious and how you're going to treat garments. And your level up is a little up is something, even though you had to do it. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a nice thing. It wasn't a nice thing to do the garment, even though you have to do it. What do they say? There was a chassid who shechts a cow and a litvak who shechts a cow. Right? The litvak shechts a cow, makes the bracha, shechts a cow, and finished. The chassid makes the bracha, shechts a cow, and then sheds a tear. What's the difference? It's a mitzvah to shech the cow. Everything. You believe me, if you shech the cow every day, don't you become a little bit less sensitive to human life? Look at butchers. Nothing against butchers, chas v'shalom. But if every day you shech the cow, it's going to be hard for you to imagine that if you see other people suffering, it's going to be harder to shed a tear. Okay, whatever. I'm just saying, it's not that you're a bad guy. You're doing a mitzvah, you're shechting a cow. But you're going to lose your sensitivity. So you have to do something in your life to make a tikkun on that. That's all. So David had to rip a garment, even though he didn't want to rip the garment. Even if it bothered him, he ripped the garment. He didn't want to rip the garment. And he saved Shlomo's life. Ap al pi kain everything. But at the end of the day, is it not going to damage you a little bit that you damaged the garment? It is. It's going to affect you. And it's not that Hashem is mad at you and he's angry at you and he's all punishing. He just wants you to leave this world, that whatever taint happened in a minimal way to David HaMelech because of that, Hashem said, I want you to learn that, garments are very important. And you'll see that in your own life. If your garment doesn't work and your body doesn't work properly and it gets a little cold, you're going to see how bad it is. And you'll realize, even on that level. And that David had to learn. So it's not necessary. What Hashem brings suffering isn't always a punishment. It's not meant to be a punishment. It's meant to fix and repair. And there, even though you have to be engaged. You can imagine if a guy has to work for the vice squad. What's that going to do to his moral character? Even though people have to work in the vice squad. You're trying to improve the overall morality of the country, right? To work on the vice squad. What's going to happen to the guy eventually? It's not so pashut. Imagine a person during the Holocaust had to be Michal Shabbos to save people's lives. Yeah, save people's lives. Had to be Michal Shabbos. Isn't it going to somehow impact on your reverence for Shabbos? Can you imagine you're driving on Shabbos, you're listening to Shabbos, and like maybe for many days, you do it Michal Shabbos, Michal Shabbos, Michal Shabbos. So, well, it's got to do something. If my body, in other words, if my body is doing something that it's not supposed to be doing, even though my mind is saying that it's permitted. So in terms of the mind and the heart, there's nothing wrong. But in terms of the body is doing something it shouldn't be doing. Let's say a person's very sick, and the doctor said, in order to live, you have to eat treif. He's doing Aveira. He's not doing Aveira. But at the end of the day, but treif is going into the system. It's got to do something negative to the person. So, why and this, and is Hashem fair? Doesn't matter. But the point is, it's still damaging the system in some way. It's so different, person, God forbid, has cancer, you have to give him chemotherapy. So we said, Baruch Hashem, is he really cancer? Yeah, but can you imagine all the side effects that chemotherapy has? But then you got to find a way to correct the damage chemotherapy does. So sometimes, you have to do an Aveira to do a mitzvah. It's still going to damage your system. And therefore it's got to be corrected. And Hashem loved David HaMelech. He wanted to leave this world completely intact. So for the last few months from his life, last years of his life, he'll be cold. He has arthritic condition or whatever that makes him very cold. And he'll learn certain lessons about that and to appreciate a garment more. So when he leaves the world, he's perfect and intact. It's only the body anyway. Got to remember. You got to look at suffering. It's all good. All suffering is good. Yisurim are good. And Hashem says, I want you to leave in the nicest way. If I didn't care about you, you'd leave with a little taint that would have to be corrected in the next world. Better finish it off over here.
There's a couple of questions.
So that's the best way I can explain that. I hope it's MS. It seems reasonable. And you don't see David complaining to Hashem at the end of his life because of that. I'm sure he understood the message. So really, David did everything he could to make sure that Shaul would walk out of this alive and that peace could be made. And that was just incredible, David's fortitude and able to do that. Yeah?
So two questions. One is, I know it says corner, but I'm picturing a king's robe and not a four-cornered garment.
Well, a Jewish king's robe would have, because he wants to have the mitzvah tzitzis.
Yeah. So over the robe would have tzitzis?
No, the robe was four-cornered. Why can't it be four-cornered? It doesn't have to be round.
I'm thinking of fancy velvet robe.
It'd be very fancy, but it's just, comes, splits, just like a suit.
Like the Indian.
A very nice robe, but it has slits at the bottom, so it's cornered. It can be very fancy. A Jewish king wears a robe a little different than a Goyish king.
Okay, second is we always rip a garment when a person becomes a mourner. So are we not showing, disrespect for the garments in that respect, when you rip the garment?
Again, but the rabbis say that we have to do this. Again, why do we, it's good you brought this up. Why are we ripping our clothes when that's happening? To say the same thing. To realize, to focus on that only the garment left. Only the person's garment that's left, not more than that. We're mourning over the garment. We're not mourning over the neshama. That's very therapeutic. It's very, very therapeutic. They said this is something that you have to do. You have to rip the garment to appreciate that life is with the person that's leaving you. It's only the garment that left. Only the garment left, not the neshama. The neshama is still there. Your relationship with that person has not ceased, will never cease.
What he's asking is not that disrespect for the garment, like what's the balance here?
So again, they're saying we're dealing with a psychologically traumatic situation in which most normal people can come out of this damaged. So the rabbis understood to have the person be psychologically balanced, he needs to understand the message of the person is, even though intellectually he accepts God's judgment, but emotionally he doesn't. And therefore he has to rip the garment. And Chazal say this is what you have to do in order to come out a sane and normal person. But it's the lesser of two evils. If you don't go through this Shiva process properly, you will come out not normal. And you'll become desensitized to human life, and you'll also not be able to effectively deal with the loss of this person. Right? So again, we're focusing on that it's the garment that's been destroyed, but not the neshama. And you'll be able to continue having a relationship with this person on a more spiritual level.
Was our correction required for that?
Well, obviously Chazal felt it was necessary. And they say it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of kriya. You have to do it. It's not up to me. That already, Chazal understood this is something we have to do. Same thing, you break a glass under the chuppah. Right? You're breaking a perfectly good glass under the chuppah because a person could make a mistake and think this marriage is a physical marriage. I'm marrying this woman because she's gorgeous. I'm marrying this man because he's wealthy. And don't make a mistake. It's not a physical world. So we destroy something that's very physically precious. You find this in the Gemara. There are certain rabbis broke certain dishes, chasanas, bedavka. So
that's justifying why we're doing it.
So
David has a very good justification for what he did.
Right.
But at the end,
but his was a unique.
You have to pay for it. So what's the payoff here?
Again, I guess if Chazal instituted it as a mitzvah, then they got clearance from God. So when a person does it on his own, you have to be careful. There might not be. It's not the same. That shows you the power of a mitzvah. When it's a mitzvah already, then the mitzvah protects you. If you're doing because God said you have to do it. For my part, I don't want to rip my garment. God said you have to rip your garment. God says I have to do a mitzvah, then I have to do a mitzvah. It's nothing to talk about. And frankly, people don't want to rip their garments. They don't. And I sometimes have to force them doing a mitzvah. It's not that they wanted to do it, right? I think also, one other point he was hinting to him, what do you do when you prepare a body for burial? What do you do? The guy is wrapped up in his talus. What do? You rip off one corner of the talus during the Chevra Kadisha when they're preparing the body. He's buried in his talus, you rip off one corner, because why? He's pater in mitzvahs now. He's not obliged to do mitzvahs anymore. So in a way, maybe he's kind of hinting to him, do you think you're a dead man already? He's like, you're a dead man. Your cloak is missing one corner. Maybe he is. Maybe anybody who's makabel lashon hara is considered like a dead person. Right? It's considered like a dead person because there's no sense of self. That's the whole thing. 4 people are considered like a dead person. One is a mitzara. Why is someone a mitzara? Because he talks lashon hara. It means a baal lashon hara is considered like a dead person. So David Melch says, you realize, Shul, because all lashon hara you're listening to, that I have to treat you like a dead person? Is that the way you want to live your life? Or maybe you want to change the way you're living your life? Another way that David Melch is teaching Shul a very powerful lesson.